So I'm just going to go based on my screen. Again, you guys have the questions in the chat to the right. We'll start with Matt. Matt, if you could pick either a good memory, a bad memory, or something you would like to gain, feel free to share the memory if you would like to, but I ask you to keep it in just a couple words or 2 sentences maximum.
My first Titanic makeout moment in my first car.
Was this good or bad? Bad, I'm assuming.
Oh, this is definitely good. I was fogging up the windows like the movie, so.
I love it. All right, so good memory. Hold on to that. Marlene, which one are you choosing?
I am going with the good memory, and my good memory is reconnecting with the love of my life, whom I'm going to marry.
Peter, I love to hear that. How's he doing?
He's doing good, working hard. Thank you.
As always, hard worker. Love it. Jen, how about you? Which one would you like to choose?
I have chosen a good memory that I will keep to myself.
Fair enough. And Taylor, you are next on my screen, madam. So which one would you like to choose?
Something to get out of this today is just being able to look at life in a more positive way.
I love that. Look at life in a more positive way. That's powerful. Thank you for sharing. Jeff, which one are you choosing?
I'd have to go with a good memory, and that would be making the decision to go away to school after taking a year off after high school.
Let's go. That's a big decision. After a year off. Okay, great. And then last but not least, Ashley, which one would you like to choose?
Well, I have a good memory today. Well, this part of today, and that would be celebrating my 30th birthday.
Let's go. I love that. Awesome. Okay, thank you guys so much. So again, we have everybody has picked one of these. If you have chosen the memory, we are actually going to be using this. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys really quickly. And again, you all already have this in your email, but I think these 2 questions are extremely powerful. Now, again, this PDF is for you. You keep this, use this over and over again. This is your tool moving forward. These 2 questions are absolutely powerful. And you're going to see how in the story that I'm about to share with you. But question number 1, do you view this as the beginning or as the end? Do you view this as the beginning of the relationship or the end of the relationship? Is this the beginning of your career or the end of your career? What you'll notice is the way that you view the beginning or the end drastically dictates. If it's the beginning of a romantic relationship, you're head over heels, you're fully involved, you're emotional, all of these beautiful things. If you view it as the end, you're not going to put that energy and effort towards it. It's a very different outcome based simply on the way we view it. Number 2, what good could this lead to? Now, this is really more in a negative context. If we're going through adversity or trauma or something of that nature, and we're reflecting or shifting our perspective, we want to look for the good. So I'll give you a really quick example. When I went to buy a house recently, I found this house was absolutely perfect. It was on 70 acres. It had a barn. It had the perfect house, all these gardens. It was secluded, everything that I was looking for. And I went to put an offer in, and it was already sold. And I was devastated. I went through this process about 7 or 8 times. I'd find this perfect house and it would sell, perfect house and it would sell. What I found out about the first house, because this is right down the road from me, is actually 2 months after they closed, the well went completely dry. So I dodged a bullet there. Now, in that moment, because emotion was high, it was really easy for me to say, oh my goodness, I didn't get the house I wanted. This sucks, and be in that negative state. But when you shift and say, okay, what good could this lead to? Well, I'm going to find a better house. And I did. And so again, when we go into these scenarios, you want to ask yourself these 2 questions. Is this the beginning or the end? And equally, what good could this lead to? So I want to share a story with you very quickly, and then we're going to jump into the actual exercise. By the way, most of you have probably heard this story. It's been made into several movies. It's been made into books. It is repopulated. It's a true story. This story takes place in Utah. Now, there is this young male, and he decides that he's going to go out on a hike on this particular day. And he goes out by himself, and he's got his backpack, and that's all he really takes with him. Now, this is in the middle of summer. So we're talking Utah. It's over 100 degrees by himself, not, no cell phone reception, nothing like that. So this gentleman's going through his walk, and he goes into this little cavern, and he's kind of going through all these rocks, and he feels the ground start to shake. And before he can really react, and this again is a true story, a full boulder falls on him and wedges his arm in between the rocks. And now I'm asking this to the group openly. If he viewed this as the end, how would he react? Just shout it out.
He would have panicked and possibly died very soon.
100%. The
Yes.
average person can only survive 3 days max without water. So this guy doesn't have water. He's in over 100-degree temperatures. His arm is crushed in a boulder. He could have just said, you know what? This is it. I give up. I'm done. And perished right there. What would he do if he viewed this as the beginning? And again, just shout it out.
Figure out how to get out.
You're 100% right. And that's exactly what he did. So simply by taking that moment and saying, is this the end or is this the beginning, dictated the way that he reacted. And Jeff, you're 100% right. He viewed this as the beginning. And so he had two things to his advantage. He had a water bottle and a pocket knife. He survived for 127 hours with no food, no water. Okay. How did he do it? He recycled his urine in this water bottle and continued to drink it. Now, the more difficult part of this is he's lodged up under this rock. So he took his pocket knife and he started to cut his arm off. Now, you may be thinking, oh my gosh, that would be painful, but you know what? I'm fighting for my life. I've got that. I've got to do it. It's life or death. But one thing that I think is really interesting is we have something called the median nerve that runs all the way through our arm. And this is one of the strongest nerves in the body. When you go to touch that in any condition, even if it was with a dandelion, it screams fire because it's a protective mechanism. And so when he got to that point, he had to psychologically fight to actually cut his arm off to live. But he viewed it as the beginning. And so he shifted his identity from, I am a victim, I'm stuck, I'm going to die here, to I'm making it out without an arm, but I'm making it out. So again, I always urge you to ask yourself, is this the beginning or is this the end? What good could this lead to? Now, in this particular moment, what is some good that you guys think led to this? Well, I'll give you an example, right? We're talking about it right now. We're talking about the story of this individual who survived a traumatic experience. And so that gives hope. So it had good. Now, real quick, let's go to the next part. Before we do, does anybody have any questions or comments on that? Okay, awesome. So when we go to this part right here, I want you to write down your memory, whether it's the good memory or the bad memory. Okay. Now, I'm going to challenge you guys at the very end just to ensure that you become proficient at using this technique. This is part of a bigger picture. Ashley, I know you're very familiar with this. Marlene, you're very familiar with this, but this is a very powerful tool. So what I'll do is I'll go through each of the four and we'll stop. If you have any questions or comments or ways that you have used this, please share it with the group because I promise you'll probably change somebody else's outcome. So number one, when you take your good memory or your bad memory, when we say proportion, what we're saying here is we want to look at this from the big picture. When I say big picture, I'm not talking about a week time frame, right? We're talking years or maybe at the end of our life. We're talking about how does this scenario right now affect my life, big picture? You know, again, when I gave you that example about the house, well, big picture, that led me to a house that was better. And I didn't have that well dry up, which would have been a catastrophe. So looking at the big picture, any questions, comments, or anybody that's used this that gained value from the proportion, from putting it into the big picture? Anything that you guys have real quick before we go to 2? Okay. So on the objectivity side, when we say rational thinking, what we're doing is we are detaching emotionally. What happens when our emotion is high, we're very reactionary. We don't get that logical outcome. And so we want to view the facts. You know, there's always 3 sides to a story. There's your version, the other person's version, and the actual facts. We're not talking about the emotion. We're talking about the facts. Okay. Fact, I didn't get the house. Another fact, I got a better one. These are facts, right? There's not really a lot of emotion tied to them. It's just, it's this way or it's the other. Viewpoint. Now, this is one of my favorites for viewpoint. So when we talk about viewpoint, this is, we want to bring all of the possible perspectives here. So when we do this, it's not to say that, hey, you know what? I'm going to go ask Matt for advice, and whatever he says, I must do it that way. That's not what we're saying here. When we say viewpoint, it's not that you have to accept everybody's opinion. You do not. You have the power to accept or reject any of these opinions, right? What we're saying is you want to look at every feasible outcome. So I call this the perspective ball, right? So when we say viewpoint, if you look at the top of this or the side of this or the bottom, you get a different view. You get a different angle. You see something new every single time. That's what we mean when we say viewpoint. We want to bring as many possible angles into this decision-making process. And then finally, on step 4, when we say clarity, we know we can act confidently from a place of assurance because we've looked at the moment from a big picture scale. We've been able to objectively break this down, remove the emotion, and come logically. We've been able to bring multiple different viewpoints and see it from different angles. Again, there's 3 versions of a story: ours, the other person's, and the facts. And then fourth and finally, now that we've gone through that process, we can confidently act from assurance. What you'll notice is that there are 2 types of decisions that we have to make on a daily basis. We have to make big decisions and we have to make small decisions. So when we're looking at this process, sometimes a small decision doesn't require all 4 steps. You might go through a small decision and quite simply say, let me look at this from the big picture. Whereas a larger decision, you may have to go through all 4. It's a must, right? So I'm going to stop for a second. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or again, have you been able to apply this in a way that might be helpful for somebody else? And you can just shout it out.
I have a comment. It's like always crazy when this happens, but I literally did not think about it. I mean, we've done this several times. I didn't think about it this way until you just like described it or whatever and was explaining it. But the way that I've been doing this activity or exercise is on past events, obviously, because these are memories, right? But it's like we're actively going through situations, circumstances, probably some like people more than others, like other people are like, everyone's going through something different, you know, a different part of your life. It didn't hit me just until now to like, when you're in that like thick of the moment of like, is this what I want? Is this not what I want? Like making a decision rather, like using this exercise, like thinking forward, just to make sure that you're on the path that you want. Because I think for me in particular, I can get very caught up in like emotion, whether like it's a good emotion or a bad emotion, but it can take me away from like, well, yeah, but like, what's the deal? Like, you can't let your emotions dictate your life. You know what I mean? Like, they're very important, but just to take that step back and be able to analyze and just like get you to a better place and like, you know, whatever, like you said, the house situation, like that's a good example of in that moment. Like, I'm sure you like had that hard time, but you were able to get through that and focus. You know what I mean?
Thank you so much for sharing, Ashley. And by the way, guys, Ashley's been implementing this, and you've come through some massive breakthroughs with some really deeply rooted negative memories. So just watching you actually go through this process is fantastic. But I love to hear what you just said about, well, it's not always bad past memories, right? You know, you can apply this to other parts of your life as well. It's not just processing those things. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you, Ashley. Anybody else before we go on? Okay, awesome. So I'm not going to run through every single one of these questions, but I'm going to explain them and I'll pull out one question. So really what this is for you is when you are in a particular situation, this allows you to reframe with a positive perspective. So I have to be very, very clear before we dive into this. Nothing is always positive, and it shouldn't be. You know, for example, you can't just say, okay, if I went outside right now and I wishfully thought for a bed of gorgeous perennials, they're not just going to show up, right? I have to intentionally plant the right things. So when it comes back to this perspective and balance, we're looking to reframe it in the positive light. Now, I'm not saying that bad doesn't happen and we ignore bad. You need the bad. You need the rain with the sun. You have to have it. You face it, you address it, and you move on. You don't stay in that place though. And that's the whole purpose of the perspective. It's not to say I'm blinded to the emotions. It's rather to say I recognize the emotions are there. Here's how I'm shifting it to serve me. Okay. So when we think about balance, you know, we're talking about how this has a big impact on you from the big picture. So that goes kind of back to proportion, right? What do you have to be grateful for right now? I think that this is so huge, and so often we lose sight of this. We're in this world of immediacy that we all want everything immediately at our fingertips, right? We go on Amazon, we have Prime membership, we make an order. If it's not here in 2 days, we're upset. That's become the norm for society. And so we got to realize that if you have a roof over your head, if you ate today, if you have clean clothes, if you have somebody in this world that cares about you, you know, those are things to be grateful for. If you have a breath right now, you have something to be grateful for. Perspective of time. I absolutely love this one I'd call this one more the viewpoint, right? You're stepping back and looking from different angles. But the way that I think about this is, if I make this decision right now, how is this going to look 10 years down the road? So often we get into these patterns and these habits and we make decisions over and over and over again. And then we say, you know what, if I did the same thing for the next 5 years, my life is not going to be where I want it to be. So when you take time into consideration, this is a good way to break those questions down. This one is huge. The perspective of purpose and passion. So real quick, does anybody want to share what your take is on purpose or on passion? Does anybody have a good example or distinction between the two that you'd like to share? I can't see everybody, so just shout it out if you do. Okay, no big deal. So, you know, so often we get into this train of thought and we convince ourselves of the compelling reason to make that decision and move forward. But how often do we go after something we want and then consciously make a conversation why we shouldn't have it? You know, I think that again, when we look at viewpoint, that's a really good way to look at all these different angles. And when you've considered them, again, you come to that resolution or that decision with clarity and assurance. The perspective of freedom. I absolutely love this one because more often than not, whenever you ask somebody why they haven't gotten the particular goal or result that they wanted, the number one thing people say is a lack of resources, a lack of money, a lack of time. I didn't know the right person. I didn't know how to get started, all of these things. But I really like what Tony Robbins said. It's not that you lack resources, it's that you lack resourcefulness. And so I really like the first question. For sake of argument, let's say that you have total control of this outcome, and you know whatever action you take is going to get you to that place. How would you view the situation then? How would that be different? The crazy part is you do have that control, right? We live in information overload right now. You could have zero experience as a mechanic and go watch a YouTube video and know how to take an engine out of your car. Seriously, like, it's crazy. Perspective of motives. The big thing here is that often we might go to make one decision and not realize that there are exterior factors or other parts of our life that are motivating this decision that actually have nothing to do with this actual decision. So it's really important to take that step back and see what else is motivating this move. It might be a friend, it might be a family member, it might be a romantic partner, whatever that is, but is that really your authentic self answering this? The perspective of confidence. So the thing that I love about this is that when we face adversity and trauma, we all will, we all have. When we face those moments, instead of looking at, oh my gosh, this is happening to me, and taking that victim mindset, when you act from, I know this adversity is going to make me stronger, it's a different outcome. That's the perspective shift, and you gain that confidence, right? So that way, instead of going into a tough environment or situation and looking at it negatively, now it's a positive. In fact, I'm excited when adversity comes now, because now I know that somewhere down the road, I'm going to be a stronger person because that happened. And I wouldn't be that way if that adversity did not happen. So knowing that when you go through a bad experience, even, or a good one, of course, but if you go through a bad experience, it is, I can act confidently, not because I'm a victim and these things are happening to me, but I'm actually the victor and I'm making these things happen for me. The viewpoint of others. Now, again, the only thing I really want to identify here is that you have the power to accept or reject people's thoughts. When we come into this in the viewpoint of others, it is not to say I have to emulate anything that anybody else does, but rather I want to hear a different perspective from somebody else, because it gives me more power to make the right decision in this moment. It allows me to shift my perspective and see it from somebody else's view. And then the final one, in terms of clarity, again, that is acting knowing that you've gone through these questions, you've gone through these processes, and you know, I've analyzed this so minutely that I'm expecting these negative things could happen or these positive things could happen. But when you're so clear and you have that data, you know you're acting confidently. Now, you don't want to get an information overload where you're getting all this information and you never make a decision. You want to make those decisions quickly, but you can do so knowing that if I can expect this as the worst outcome and I can expect this as the best outcome, I am mentally prepared to go through this endeavor, good or bad. So it doesn't really rattle me. I can handle either one. And another spin on that is, if I make this decision now, what is the absolute worst possible outcome? Can I live with that outcome if that's what happens? That's a really good way. And so what you'll notice about all of these guys is that these are questions that you ask yourself to shift the way you're viewing a particular moment. Before we go to the final part, I'm going to open it up to the group. Do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, anything that you'd like to share? Marlene, I'm going to pass it over to you for a minute, if that's okay. I know that you don't have a voice right now, so you don't have to speak too much on this, but I think that, you know, I think back to one of the most powerful things that I ever saw you do was simply reframe your identity. And what I'm specifically talking about here is you and I had a conversation, and at one point you said, I am what? Unorganized, right? And when you said, I am unorganized,
Yes.
you continued to get those results.
Yes,
But we simply had a conversation, and all you did was reframe that and say,
yes.
I am organized.
I
And guess
am
what happened?
organized. And
Everything
it's
changed.
become a part of my day-to-day life in a way that I had never conceived up here before. And it's made a major change and shift, and it's all positive, because when I get up every day I get up, I'm already thinking of little things that I want to accomplish or that I want to do. A lot of it is around environment. And I didn't understand for a long time how important our environment is, because it can affect us either positive or negative. And so readjusting the way I'm thinking and the way I'm doing has just absolutely enlightened my life. And it's making it easier for someone that's in my life, Pete. It's amazing, because it doesn't just touch he and I, it touches a whole lot and a whole lot of people.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, and I think that comes down to reframing it, right?
Yes.
It wasn't a massive change. It was simply changing the words, you know.
It was changing the words and the mental.
That's right. That's right. From going from unorganized to I am organized. Okay. And I just love that reframe. It's so simple. You know, again, I shared this the other day, but humans are so smart. Like, we are such smart creatures. We really, really are. And that comes with pros and cons. We're so intellectually advanced that we have all this information at our fingertips, that we get into information overload and action poverty. We have all the we know how to do anything we want. We just don't take the action. So it's really powerful. And look, here's another point. If you look for the bad out there in the world, I guarantee you will find it. It is everywhere. But I also challenge you to reframe that. If you look for the good, I promise you will find that as well. It's there. So it's both there. You can take that perspective of the negativity, or you can take that perspective of the opportunity. They're both there. It's just a different way that you view it. So any other questions? Okay, awesome. So here's the thing. I'm going to go back to this, and the final part is really a challenge that I want to extend to everybody. So if everybody could choose either the positive or negative memory and write it out in detail, write all the things that happened, explain this as if you were speaking to a child so that they could understand it, right? And then run it through those 4 steps. So when we go back up, proportion, objectivity, viewpoint, and clarity, you want to run it through all of these. So for me, what that looks like is I would put proportion, and I'd say, this memory affected me positively in this way, right? Like, I can sit here and tell you, being abused every day excessively as a child helped me in a positive way. A lot of people could sit there and look at that as a negative, but when you shift the perspective and you go through this in big picture, you know, it helps to change everything. So go through this with your good or bad memory, all 4 steps, and then email me the results. And then when I get that result back from you, I'll break it all down, and then we'll have a conversation. So no strings attached or anything like that. I just want to make sure that you guys are able to use this moving forward, right? So we want to inspect what we expect. So that's a really good way for us to come together and do this. Any other questions or comments on that? Okay. So one last thing that I'll share with you guys, and this is going to be a quicker group today. And by the way, I have tons of information on this. If you guys want me to keep rolling, I can keep rolling. But one thing that I did want to share is that, and I know a couple of you already have been in this group, but we are relaunching BMG, and I'm so excited for this. We have the next 3 months of topics are all mapped out. Everything's set up. And I know, Marlene, you've been there. Ashley, you've been there. Matt, you've been there. I'm curious real quick, if you guys could just share to the group something that you've gained from BMG, or if you could share an experience or what it's like, or just anything that you'd like to share with somebody that's never even seen it before.
I'm going to make it real quick. I loved the interaction. I met new people. I got to hear different perspectives. I got to share thoughts that came to me so powerfully because of whatever the topic was that day. I gleaned from every single one, little nuggets, and sometimes they were big ones. So wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, I love that, Marlene. I really like what you said about the idea part. You know, when we go to read information or material, or when we attend webinars or all these things, yeah, that's rooted in self-mastery. That's the objective of all personal development. But equally, it's about developing our own ideas. You can hear somebody's concept or idea and think of something completely on your own independently just from hearing that, because it sparked that fire. So I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing. Ash, Matt, do you guys have anything that you'd like to say about BMG?
I'll share. I was going to say something similar in terms of perspectives. Just like being with like-minded people, and then being able to hear like their perspective, but and like things in a way that you may not have thought about them, just because that's not like, it's obviously not your mind, and like your brain might not work the same way, you know, but then it's so cool because it opens up, and like, it's basically like, I don't know, it's sort of like just a really cool club that, like, say for example, like we were all local and we like get together and hang out and just like you'll talk about like meaningful stuff that's like going to make our lives better. Which I feel like is so important these days, because we just have social media, which is just flooding us with just like, there's a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of useful stuff. And a lot of times we don't have just the outlet and like the expansion of the things that, you know, we want to and that are good for us. And so it's just, I don't know, it's always been a very cool experience to just get to know other people and have like meaningful relationships that are not surface level, you know? And so I think that's really cool.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I love that, the club, right? It is like a club. We should call it Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
No, but it's a lot of fun. And it's, you know, something that you mentioned, Ashley, that I think is really important to distinguish is that again, it's these thought-provoking ideas and concepts. It's not just personal or business, but it's a fusion of both. That's another thing I wanted to share with you guys. So instead, and Matt, thank you for your input on that. Instead of doing just one or the other, or just having them separate, we just combined them. So we go through topics like things to look out for when starting your own company. We go through things like reflection, which Jeff, you were there for that talk. It's a little bit different, but similar stuff. We've got the decision-making process and tools. So there's a ton of stuff in there that we go through. You guys are more than welcome to join. There is a cost, but, and I didn't want to share this first, but we are actually going to do 50% off today. So basically the whole group would be $50 a month. I guarantee you will not find that value anywhere else. It's $50 for the month. That only lasts for the next 24 hours. And the other really cool part to this, it's month to month. So you jump in, you do 1 month, and let's say you have plans all of August and you can't make it, you just don't pay and you don't come. No strings attached. Go about your life. Then you come back and you can jump in the next month. And then other people, if you choose to, you can get the whole thing discounted up front for the year. So just something to think about. But getting back to the reframing and perspective shifts, I think the really big thing is to go through those questions independently, right? Go through those questions with yourself and change the view that you're looking at this scenario through. Any last minute questions, comments, tips, snide remarks, anything you'd like to share with the group?
Okay, well, here's where I chime in. Because you know, keep in mind I was eating and then traveling, so I kind of heard things as you guys were going along. I couldn't follow in your guide, and then the Jewish guilt kick in. I got home and I was able to sit there and look at your Word documents. I hadn't seen it all day long. So to me, like the BMGs are like life learning lessons for dummies. So yeah, you have like the dummies book. Well, that's kind of how I view it, just to make it easier. Also, Keegan, you mentioned about the early holiday special for your group. Is that also through Eventbrite to purchase that, or is there another way to purchase it?
There's a discount code, and I'll be sending that to everybody in an email once we follow up today.
Yeah, because to me, that works, because before it's $25, a pop. It's like, okay, well, that's like $400, for like the 3 months or something like that. So this to me is more palatable, and to me, brownie points for doing that. So because I wasn't going to join, but now you mentioned about that, it's like, okay, I can still move and still pay for your course. So I'm grateful to be able to do that. But to me, I always learn something new. Keegan is like the Yoda of when it comes to people advice. Help me what you will. Problems you have, fix them I must. So that's kind of what he does well. And he's turning red too, so he's practicing for Santa. I think you're about 6 months off, dude, but you're doing well. Keep turning red, and you should be fine for the holiday season.
Thanks, man. I'll have to come down to Florida and get a tan.
Yeah, I own a Cheesecake Factory, by the way. So
you did not forget. You did not forget. No, but I love that, guys. And again, thank you all so much for your time. Liz, is that actually Liz? I know in past events that was somebody else's account. Is that right? I don't know if you can hear. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I had it on mute just because I'm around a group of people, but no, I'm new to this. I actually saw your link on Antonio's group chat.
Oh, yeah. Consistency wins.
Right.
Awesome. Well, real quick, do you have any questions or anything that you'd like to ask from the group? Anything we can help you with? I'm not sure. I know you missed like the very beginning, the first couple minutes. I already sent you the PDF. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to run through that right now.
No, that's okay. I kind of just looked over it really briefly, but I mean, I think for the most part, it's pretty self-explanatory, but if anything, I can totally email you.
Yeah, absolutely. So awesome, guys. Well, if you guys don't have any other questions, oops, I'm sorry. Wrong thing. If you don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and close out right now. But thank you guys so much for your time. I'm really excited to get these challenges back from people. Like I said, it's simply just to help you with that process so you can use that moving forward. And if you guys would like to join the BMG, I'm again going to send that to everybody independently. Can't wait to see you all there. Have a great week. And I'll send this recording as well.
Thanks, Keegan.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
too.